So you want to go on a family vacation, but you're not sure if you can afford it. Well, let me show you how my family went across most of the United States and toured for 2.5 weeks, and I'll break down the cost of every single thing that we did, and you'll see that you can make it very affordable to travel, even with a big family. So to start off, this is what we did on our trip. We started in the Northeast, in Connecticut, traveled all the way through Pennsylvania, Ohio, to the Indiana Dunes, where we spent the first 2 days of our trip chilling at the beach in Indiana Dunes. We specifically did this because we knew the kids would need a break partway through. We couldn't just drive all the way to South Dakota, so we wanted to find a spot somewhere in between where they could chill out and enjoy some time together. And the beach is a great place to do that. Indiana Dunes is absolutely beautiful. It's not like a huge national park, but it is now a national park, and we were able to go there first. We then went and spent one night, and one night only, in a hotel in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And then we traveled from there all the way out to the Rapid City area, where we were then able to tour the Black Hills and backtrack just a little bit to the Badlands. From there, we went south to Colorado and spent probably 4 or 5 days in the Rockies, and then went south down to New Mexico to Santa Fe, where we spent a few days hanging out with my sister-in-law, and we were able to camp in her backyard. From there, we drove 36 hours straight home. Now that may seem like a lot, but let me tell you that we saved a lot because we did not take flights and we did not stay in hotels most of the time. So here's a breakdown of everything that we spent and how we did this to save money. Okay, so before we go any further, I just want to go over the logic of how I counted what we spent money on and what we didn't spend money on for this trip. So for example, if we bought groceries, I did not count that because we would buy groceries no matter what. Wherever we were, whether we were at home or on vacation, we would have bought groceries. So buying groceries rather than going out to eat allows you to save a lot of money. What I did count were things like if we stopped on the way for food, like fast food restaurants, things like that, that counted. Now, when you do this math, you also have to think about the fact that we turned off all the electronics in our house. We unplugged everything except the refrigerator and the 2 chest freezers in our house. Everything else was unplugged. So we saved money on electricity. We turned off the heat in the house, so it wasn't heating the hot water heater. So we saved money on oil and electricity while we were gone. I'm not gonna give you an estimate for what that was, but you can subtract that out from your total costs. All right, starting from the number one thing that we spent money on, gas. We spent a lot of money on gas. We spent $1,056.14 on gas. Now I know you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. And you're right, that's most of what we spent money on this trip, was just gas. But there's 6 of us. We needed a big vehicle to make this trip, and we need a big vehicle in general just to travel around, dropping kids off at things and whatnot. So we don't have like a Prius or something like that that's gonna get us there on very minimal gas. But if you have a car that is smaller, we were getting about 15 miles to the gallon. If you have something that works better than that, then by all means, you will spend a lot less money. But if you have a car that gets 30 miles to the gallon, you will have spent about half as much. The tolls kind of mess that number up a little bit. So if you have a vehicle that gets 30 miles to the gallon, you might have spent $560. Our second highest thing was lodging. In this case, we spent $136.69 on a hotel for one night. And that we were able to spread out sleeping bags in the room. And so even though there were 6 of us, we only bought one hotel room for the night, and that was it. That was in Sioux Falls. And then we were able to move on from there and continue to camp. So we camped before we went to Sioux Falls and then after. But because Sioux Falls was happening at sort of a day where we were just gonna stop for one night, get in the car, and then keep driving the next day, it was gonna be a lot easier than getting a campsite, packing up in the morning, and getting going again. And also, there just weren't a lot of campsites around that area. Beyond that, I went on recreation.gov and I ordered all of our campsites about 6 months in advance. And with that, we paid $218 for all of our lodging for the entire rest of the trip. Now, this is cheating a little bit because we spent 3 days at my sister-in-law's house and we just camped in her backyard. It was actually really a nice experience to be camping in the high desert. So in terms of recreation, what we really spent most of the money on was an $80 America the Beautiful pass. And what that pass does is it allows you to go to any national park and any national monument for a year. So this thing paid for itself in about 3 days because we were traveling to all different national parks. So we were using this thing constantly, and we were able to get a very cheap entrance fee because it was just divided out amongst that $80. And now we have it for the rest of the year and we can keep using it. And then there were a couple other recreational fees as well, which were really just like in order to get into places, like the Rockies, you had to reserve a day in advance, and there was like a $2 charge to reserve for the day in advance because they were trying to minimize the number of people that were going into the park at a time. And then we spent $97.98 on souvenirs. You know, the kids want to come home with something nice, things to remember their trip from, so we allowed them to buy a few things along the way. And then the last thing was audiobooks. So when you're traveling for extremely long distances, it is incredibly helpful to have audiobooks for the kids in the car, because a Harry Potter book, for example, is like 10 hours long, right, in audiobook form. So you're able to travel, and they can listen to that, and they can look out the window, and they can see everything that's happening around them, but they're being occupied by something else. And we'll turn it off for a while, and then we'll turn it back on, and so on. And so throughout the entire trip, in purchasing additional audiobooks beyond the subscription that we have, that was the additional cost. So in total, this trip cost $1,630.33, which I would say is pretty cheap for being able to travel across most of the United States for 2.5 weeks. And the things that we did to make sure that that was going to happen is, one, we traveled in a vehicle rather than taking an airplane. Because when you take an airplane or a train, you multiply your cost by every single person that's going on that trip. Whereas if you take a vehicle, it's only multiplied out by the gas mileage, which varies depending on the size of the vehicle you're taking. In addition to that, we camped at campsites that are actually government campsites, so they're already being funded by your taxpayer dollars. So it's pretty cheap to stay there. Some of the places we stayed were very remote, and it was like $15 a night to stay there. Like when we were in the Black Hills, we just stayed in this tiny little area in the Black Hills. It didn't even have running water. Or no, it did have running water, but it was only like a faucet. And so you could go and you could fill up a water bag, or you could get water to boil or something like that. But they were fairly remote. But in doing so, you not only provide yourself the opportunity to save money, but you immerse yourself in that natural environment that you're going to explore. And then the last thing that we did is we did not eat out at all. We got a pizza one night, and that was because of the fact that it's Pizza Friday, and we usually get pizza on Fridays. Our in-laws were also down in New Mexico, and they took us out to breakfast, I think twice, which was super nice of them. But otherwise, we would have just had eggs at home. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing for all things outdoors, and generate the wild within.